Welcome to What Matters, a podcast that looks inward at unique experiences, upward for divine direction, and outward at God's activity in the world. I'm Michelle Funk, your host, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. You are in for a treat. We have the honor and the pleasure of hosting one of our upcoming Inspired for Life guest speakers. Today, you get to meet Suzanne Stabile. And I'll just introduce her just with some bio information, but we're going to get to know one another a lot better than that. I want you to know Suzanne is a sought-after speaker, so we're just so excited to get to host her. An author, of course. We have a book here. We'll perhaps talk about another. And she's written such wonderful works on the Enneagram. She is an Enneagram. She teaches with a creative approach to the Enneagram tool and offers great instruction, and does so according to bio here, with an engaging laugh and a personal vulnerability. And so I just want to say welcome to you, Suzanne. We're Zooming it today. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. It's good to be with you.
It's great to be with you. So you know a little bit about this thing called the Enneagram. And we invited you as part of Inspired for Life Women's Conference to maybe even help us understand that, as well as how it relates to this idea of grace, this thing called grace. And so I wondered if we could just talk a little bit about both or wherever you want to go.
Sure.
So, yeah. Tell me, can you just it's hard, right? But in a few sentences, just a little bit about the Enneagram?
Yeah, sure. The Enneagram is very old. It's been recorded in every faith belief. It is now available to many more people, but until the 1970s, there was very little published about the Enneagram. So that's a new thing in wisdom that people have been talking about for hundreds of years, to have ideas and information about the Enneagram in print. I have known the Enneagram for 30 plus years, and I've been teaching for 29, I think. And I find it to be perhaps the most helpful spiritual wisdom tool I know outside of centering prayer, as long as it's not taken to be more than it is. The best way I can describe it to you is that it is about 9 ways of seeing. And the assumption that we're all pretty much the same is not actually true. We're very different. And so these 9 ways of seeing, somehow, and what I think is probably part mystical, part mystery, part just wisdom, most people find themselves in one of the 9 ways without too much trouble if they hear the Enneagram taught orally, for sure. Test is not as good as oral tradition. And those ways of seeing end up determining our worldview, which determines our behavior, which determines what matters to us, to use the title of your podcast. And so I would suggest that when people start on a spiritual journey that's serious and intentional, hoping to move toward transformation, the first hurdle they run into is the fact that they struggle so much with liking and loving and forgiving themselves. And the Enneagram helps you do that by naming things that you haven't been able to exactly name for yourself, but that fit when you hear it.
Right.
And the second hurdle, if people can get through that and still kind of stay on a journey, the second hurdle tends to be issues with family and family of origin. And the Enneagram also helps you with that, because you can understand and then offer grace both to yourself and to others, why they do what they do. And I've said jokingly, but not really jokingly, that I don't have any idea what heaven is like. I'm hopeful that I'll be there, because I think probably everybody's going to be. I may have to go there with my husband, who's just holier than I am. But I would like to say to Paul, should I meet him, that I know why he did the very thing he didn't want to do. And it's because of your Enneagram number. And we all, because of how we see, continue to do the very thing that we don't want to do until we learn that we have to embrace all of who we are and work on being healthier and more whole and holier, rather than get rid of parts of ourselves that we think are not worthy of grace, perhaps.
Right.
So I believe in it, or I wouldn't travel all over and teach it. And I don't know, we have, I don't know how many letters from people telling us that it saved their marriage, it saved their relationship with their parents or their kids or their next door neighbor. Or so it's very valuable. It's very trendy right now, and I'm thankful for that. But anytime something's trendy, it tends to get watered down and at times misused and maybe spoken of in ways that don't honor the wisdom that's there. And, you know, there's two sides to everything, and it's a good thing to have more people interested. And I have a lot of work to do to undo myths about what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder why it's so hard for us to do that thing that you said, give grace to ourselves a little bit, because it seems like when we do that, we can then turn around and extend grace so much better. I don't know. What is it about us that we are just so resistant, hard on ourselves, I guess, or maybe we just don't know. We don't do the self-reflection well sometimes.
Sometimes I think one of the things the Enneagram offers us is an understanding that trying to offer or receive grace is different for each of the 9 Enneagram numbers. And so, for example, ones on the Enneagram have an inner critic that they've had since they were children. And it's a voice that critiques most of what they do all day, every day. And so for them to offer grace to themselves when they live with an inner critic all the time is much more difficult than it would be for an Enneagram number that doesn't have that critic. I'm a 2 on the Enneagram, and my main concern in life is relationships. And so if I do things that I think are going to be costly for me in relationships, then it's difficult for me to offer myself enough grace to make up for what I think is going to be loss in my relationship with someone else. Yeah. So those are 2 examples. I could go through all 9 numbers, but that would pretty much use our time, and I'm not sure that's how you want to use it. I would just suggest that I think it helps us offer grace to ourselves if we can name the things that continually get in our way on the journey. Yeah. The things about ourselves and that's hard to do if you've never heard them named or explained for you. It's hard to figure out what it is. So people say, what is it about me that people pull back from me, or people misunderstand me? And the Enneagram explains much of that. And the other thing I would say is the Enneagram, at least the way I teach it, has to do with allowing rather than trying to make something happen. Yeah. Your Enneagram number never changes. The movement that you make on the Enneagram in terms of stress and security never changes, and you can't change it. And I think frequently when we fail to be able to receive grace that we try to offer to ourselves is because we haven't been able to change something. So my way of talking about that is to say that change occurs when you take on something new, and transformation occurs when something old falls away,
Oh, nice.
and usually beyond your control.
Hmm.
So right now, at this time in our culture and in the world, which is an unusual thing to have both affected at the same time. And considering the pandemic and the liminality that the pandemic is causing for all of us,
Right.
transformative moments are available. But if you aren't able to allow them, if you try to create transformation, you will fail.
Mm.
And culturally, we're not big on allowing things. We think that we're in charge and we need to make things happen. And we
Hmm.
think we can, which is also problematic, I think.
Yeah.
Allowing things about yourself that you don't find to be helpful or that you don't like to fall away
Hmm.
means that you have to take a good look at uh, what you think you're in charge of. And I don't actually think we're in charge of much. I think we get to manage things. But beyond us, there is a reality that I think we have to make space for.
Mm.
And for most people, knowing how they see the world and how they respond to how they see, which is also in Enneagram wisdom, it helps them. My language is set the table for something new to happen. But then they can't make it happen. It's grace that it does happen.
Yeah.
And, my husband has said for a long time that uh, control cannot peacefully coexist with the reality of all the things that are going to happen. And I say that control is my favorite illusion. And I know it's an illusion, but it's still my favorite. And I still like to think I have it.
Yeah. Right.
What Joe actually says, I was a little distracted. Joe says, faith and control cannot peacefully coexist.
Okay. Faith.
And I think that's true.
Hmm.
And yet, I think, at least in the West, we are led to believe that we're in control of far much more than we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would also say, and then I'll take a breath and you can take me whatever direction you want to go, but I would also say that I think once you hear how the Enneagram describes all nine numbers, then you automatically have more compassion. When I teach a big, we call our introductory event Know Your Number. And that's an 8-hour day of me talking the whole time. But
Wow.
when I teach a Know Your Number event, I, at the very beginning, say, I think you'll probably know your number when you leave today, if you want to. Some people don't want to know. But I say, I think you'll probably know your number when you leave today, but I can't guarantee that. I can guarantee that every person in the room will leave with more compassion.
Mm. I love that.
And perhaps compassion is one of any number of precursors for grace.
Right. Yes. Oh, I love that. That's it's because I think the Enneagram, while it teaches you a lot about yourself, the kind of the end result is it enables you to have relationship with others. I mean, and that's really what it's all about. That's why we're here, to be in relationship. Yeah. So I love your language of allowing things to fall away, setting the table. And this last point, the idea that you look at others with compassion. I think grace is so multifaceted that all of those things they help us understand concept of grace a lot more. I have this book, The Road Back to You, and I know you also have written the book, The Path Between Us. And I just love your writings, and so thank you for those gifts that they are to the world. And I've noticed that you talk about when you're a child, this is kind of, you allow us to understand a little bit more about ourselves as kids as that relates to our Enneagram type. And I think that's kind of a unique teaching, is to consider, how we were as a child and how that seems to line up with our Enneagram type. So that's really cool. Did you find that was something that you just thought needed to be added to this whole concept of Enneagram instruction?
Well, I think the important part is that your Enneagram number is probably, or your personality, we could use those words interchangeably. Your personality is probably well honed by the time you're 8. So it's how you make your way in the world. And you've been making your way in the world for a very long time. So you have to give yourself some grace if you're going to be able to do things differently. And nobody gets everything right. And interestingly enough, I think the things that we need to question first are predictable, habitual, patterned behavior.
Yeah.
Because those are the things that are most likely where we're on autopilot or where we are behaving in default mode. Those are probably the places where we give ourselves excuses for, that's just the way I am and there's nothing I can do about it. And actually, that's not true. It is the way you are, but there is something that you can do about it. But I don't think you can change what you can't name.
Right.
And the Enneagram helps you name what you want to change.
Yeah.
I would say that I've been interviewed many, many times, and lots of folks say to me, so what's dangerous about the Enneagram? And the answer to that is that it's the only danger I know is if you take it to be more than it is.
Yeah.
It's just one spiritual wisdom tool. And it's a great one, but it's just one. And it's much more helpful if it's combined with others.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So we're in this pandemic thing. How are you doing? How are you doing through this? Do you feel like we're coming upon a better situation? And can I even say an end to it, or what do you think?
Well, I think there are two sides to everything, and I think there are opportunities everywhere. And I have no idea when it's going to end. I miss teaching more than I can say. I miss it more than I thought I would, even. And that's been really hard for me. I'm just completing a new book, and it was hard for me to write during this time because I wasn't with people, which is how, as a 2, I'm energized, and it's where I get ideas and things that I want to do.
Yeah.
On the other hand, even though we're both very healthy, I'm 70 and my husband is 73. And if you've never heard me, then you may not know that I am head over heels in love with him after all these years.
Nice.
And he's a pastor, and I work a lot and travel, and I'm away from home a lot. And honestly, it's been a real gift for us to be together during this time.
Yeah.
We have 4 children, and they all live in the Dallas area where we live, and 9 grandchildren, and we've not been with them. So that's hard, really hard.
Yeah.
But it's smart at the same time.
Right.
And, I think we all could have done better, all of us who are in ministry, probably, in offering practical advice during this liminal time. I actually have been talking about liminal space for probably, 15 years Father Richard Rohr is a good friend of Joe's and mine and was our spiritual director for a number of years. And he taught us about liminality a long time ago. Mm. And he says, along with others, that liminal space is the most teachable time, perhaps. Mm-hmm. And he also suggests that it's kind of the only teachable space for some things. Mm-hmm. And he points to scripture that God is always trying to get God's people in liminality in order to teach them something. So I'm not sure how well I've done or how well any of us have done in terms of asking and answering the question, what am I learning?
Right, right.
But I think we're learning something. Mm-hmm. And I hope that the lessons that individuals are learning and that families are learning and couples, and I hope they'll be lasting when we return to a more active life culturally. I don't think there is going to be a return to normal. I don't think we're going to know what normal is when we're allowed to get back into the world. And honestly, if we're supposed to learn from this, I hope our goal isn't just to go back to the way things used to be.
Right.
But that's going to take some intentionality. And I think we're all tired.
Yeah.
Really tired. So I think it's going to be an important time for creative, wise people who are seeking to be holy leaders who have a platform and a voice to say hopeful, helpful, and I'm sure challenging things to us. Mm-hmm. And maybe that will get us out of some of the polarization that is dominating much of our thought and conversation. And I don't think that's getting us anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, we just had the Super Bowl, which I'm in the Kansas City area, so this is even hard to bring up, but we still love our team. I was struck, though, as I know many were, by the commercial that was filmed in a little church out in Lebanon, Kansas, which is the exact center of the United States. I don't know if you saw this or not. Bruce Springsteen actually was part of this commercial, and the message was, let's come together. You know, let's come to the center, really. Our Methodist faith kind of teaches that as well, to come together rather than push apart or pull to one wide side or the other. Let's consider the via media, you know, the middle. Anyway, I just thought that lined up a little bit with what you said. I too hope that we're learning some really good lessons that will last. And I've joked around a little bit lately with some friends of, I've certainly learned some things I'm never going to take for granted again. And so that's been fun to kind of talk about and see if that holds true down the road, if that holds true. But
my husband is a Methodist pastor, and I believe Wesley, our founder, says, believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and beyond that, hold any opinion that you wish.
Yeah.
And Richard Rohr, Father Richard Rohr, who's a big voice in my life, says, opinions are underdeveloped thinking. Mm-hmm. Nice. And I fear that polarization has created more opinions than it has alleviated. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. You know, we'll see. I also would say this in terms of trying to offer grace to myself and to you and to anybody who hears this. It's very difficult to make changes without some tools to do that.
Right, right.
And I don't know that I, I I think there are a lot of people who don't have access to wisdom and to tools that help pave pave the way for a transformational experience or journey. So I think we need to be very mindful of the fact that a lot of people not only don't listen to a podcast, they don't have a way to listen to a podcast. And a lot of the children who haven't been in school don't have a way to be learning remotely.
Right.
And and Lamont and others who are in recovery, a line that comes out of the recovery community is every expectation is resentment waiting to happen. And I think if we aren't careful, we're going to come out of this liminal time with a lot of expectations that can't be met.
Yes.
And that will be followed, I think, by resentment.
Yes. Yeah. So our charge is to try to do something that's helpful to prevent that from happening. Yeah. Good thing I think you and I can say, we can release a little control of that and ask God to be a part of that. That's when you talked about control, I agree. It's so easy to want to be in control, but I am learning or trying to learn that it's almost freeing to release some of that and to ask God to step into that place. And, by this great gift that we have, the Holy Spirit that indwells, and this wonderful companion we have, our friend in Jesus, that there's still hope, hope for tools that will last and make a difference. There's hope for unity rather than polarization. There is hope. And so we'll join our forces and ask for guidance and pray, and just try to stand in that place. So.
Yeah, I feel like the best I can do is do my work and be the best person I know how to be, succeeding and failing every hour, and make space for other experiences and other ways of seeing. And, I've been teaching for a long, long time, and I've never met anybody who didn't want their life to have meaning and who didn't want to experience belonging. And I'm beginning to wonder if, because in churches and denominations and faith beliefs and other organizations, we have fallen farther and farther into insider-outsider mentality and you go to your church, I'll go to mine, that kind of stuff. And I wonder if that hasn't contributed to polarization, because since everybody wants to belong somewhere, if they can't belong in my church, then they'll find one, or they'll decide not to belong in any church. If they can't find a place to stand in our community, then they'll find a place to stand in another community. And I think the search for belonging and being denied that in ordinary, everyday ways has greatly contributed to the factions that are warring against one another in our culture and in our world.
Yeah. And you're right, this thing about trying to find purpose and then finding your people.
Yeah.
That's the two main things that we search for and seek.
Yeah, and it's troubling to me that it's finding my people. I would like to find my place among all people instead of trying to find my people or my tribe or so it's tricky. We have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. But it matters. It all matters.
It does.
Yeah. Well, Suzanne, thank you for having such a good conversation, thought-provoking. Thank you for your gift of writing and teaching, and for the ways that you'll teach us about grace at our conference. And just for, I heard you say you're writing a new book,
Yeah,
so we want to cheer you on with that as well. Thank you for keeping on in your teaching
yeah,
and your writing. And I wish you all of the very best. It's a joy to be able to call you friend. I hope that's all right. Even through the cyber waves, we can do that.
absolutely, Michelle. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to the retreat time, and gosh, what a honor to be with such a lovely group of women who are speaking. It's yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I think there's just going to be a huge dose of great learning and teaching. And I guess that's part of the purpose of our particular conferences. We try to introduce voices and tools and teaching and these things that do help us in our journey of establishing, or at least finding more out about our purpose, and then doing this with others, with all kinds of people. So yeah, it's going to be a joy. So thank you for being part of Inspired for Life Conference. We really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, that's what matters with Suzanne Stabile. And I'm Michelle Funk. I just want to thank you all for joining us on the podcast and encourage you to subscribe so that you'll not miss any of our episodes. It's a joy to spend time today with Suzanne. Thank you again, and I wish everybody a great day. See you next time. Thank you, Suzanne, so much for being here with us today.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
The lighting was just fine.
Good. Good. We forgot to turn it off, and
Yeah.
I'm doing several podcasts today, and so anyway, I'm glad it was good.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I was going to ask you.